Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer podcast. This is Deb McBride. I am in lovely twilight time, Escazú, Costa Rica, and it is Sunday, the 14th of June in the year 2026. And it is Flag Day in the United States, according to my calendar. Yes, June 14th. And I don't know where else it's Flag Day, if Flag Day is celebrated anywhere else, but today's Flag Day in the U.S. And we have a new moon this evening at 10:54 p.m. Eastern Time, and then the moon goes void right after that, and it is in Gemini at 24 degrees. And I mentioned this last week on this very same podcast that we would be getting this bright experience of a new moon at the end of Gemini. And it does affect the 9 degrees of the fixed sign. So if you have something in that degree, you will feel maybe some new energy coming in as well. And it is a time of good communication, of initiating communication, of initiating something, that's different as far as ideas, as far as speaking up, speaking your mind, speaking your truth. And it is ruled by Mercury, this new moon. And even though Mercury is starting to get the idea that it knows it's going retrograde, or it's actually in its retrograde, pre-retrograde shadow, it's really, a time of deep thought and some introspection, and that's always a good thing. Even though it's a new moon, it's a good time to initiate a conversation or a dialogue or reach out to someone. Maybe you want to create something new in the realm of ideas, but that's all really good to do under the new moon. And it is about 3 days or so of this energy that we carry. And even if the moon is going void right after the new moon tonight, depending on where you are in the world, it does get out of void tomorrow morning in the Eastern time zone at 8:14 a.m. So if you live in the Eastern time zone, or even the Central time zone, you're going to get a full day of, moon in Cancer and not really dealing with the void moon much at all. But, somewhere in Europe, it's going to be void when you get up tomorrow morning, and you still have a number of hours before the moon goes into the sign of Cancer. New moons are always good for starting something new. New moons are always good, especially in Gemini. It's fresh perspectives, ideas, thoughts, and communications. So use this new moon for those things and have a lovely experience of, conversing and talking and maybe coming up with some new idea. In the meantime, I tried to find Jupiter and Venus in the sky last week, and much to my dismay, there was no way to see them from where I live. It was just too cloudy, and it has been cloudy because it's rainy season, even though it's not really raining. So last weekend and then the few days before, we got a lot of rain because of a tropical storm, a tropical depression near Nicaragua. And you've heard me say before, we don't get hurricanes here because we're too close to the equator, but Nicaragua is a little bit further north, and so they get things that are a little more hurricane-ish or tropical depression, tropical storm-ish. This was Tropical Storm Christina, and it brought us a nice relief of rain, and it was cool, and it was beautiful, and it was rained hard, and now we're back to El Nino. The weather report from Costa Rica. So it's been so hot. It was so hot today. It was so hot, and it's hot now. And it just rained for, I don't even think 2 minutes. It rained. I'm like, yes, it's raining. And then it stopped right away. So hopefully tonight, my app is telling me it's raining, but it's not. Maybe in a different area of Escazú, it's raining up the mountain in San Antonio, Escazú. But so now that Venus and Jupiter have moved on, and Venus has really moved on because she's in Leo now, as I told you, people were saying things, well, I didn't really feel anything, deep and I think that when Venus and Jupiter get together, one of the things we need to keep in mind is that if we're not actively using that energy, most of the time we're not going to feel it in the way that we think we're going to feel it. So, meaning that people think it's going to come out of nowhere and you're going to like win a contest or hit the lottery, or and those are good things. You can play those things during Venus Jupiter and potentially, enter a contest and win. But remember, that's also Jupiter and Venus are also fun. So doing that is also comes under the category of entertainment, and it could be just really fun that you're doing that and you don't care if you win or lose. It has shown up in some very interesting ways. And I was looking at my friend's chart. So I have my friends that have their branding business here, and they did my Golden Astrologer brand. And on Monday, the day before the Jupiter Venus, they had two people quit their branding business. So they had two people quit, and one of them was being taken to a new job that was remote in the United States by a former employee that used to work with them here and worked remotely with them for years until she left last October. And so she plucked this person out of their business and brought them to her new job. And so my friends felt a bit of treason. And so this happened on Monday. Now, the interesting thing about this is that my one friend had in his chart the south node exactly where Jupiter and Venus were landing. So Jupiter and Venus landed on his south node, and it was important for him to let go and know that everything was going to be okay. But it isn't always a big, wonderful, sunny experience sometimes. And they did have a great new project show up, and they had to go to the Dominican Republic the week before. But sometimes you have to let go. And when Jupiter and Venus line up on your south node, that is a profound reason to let go, even if it's this wonderful benefit aspect that you're having that only happens once a year, and especially in this particular area of the zodiac, it only happens once every 12 years or so. And who would think that this is what it brought to him? But he got some other things simultaneously happening. And so one of the things is that the sun in Gemini went on his Saturn. So the sun went on his Saturn, the Jupiter Venus was on his south node, and then he also had Saturn, which is in Aries, on his Chiron opposite his Uranus. So Saturn triggered the Uranus, which says, you got to let go. It's time to let go. He's Uranus in Libra. And so in the meantime, what I really think was the match that lit the whole thing was that he was having his lunar return. So that's four things. Four things happening to this friend of mine on Monday. And while Jupiter and Venus are a little longer, Saturn is a little longer, the moon is not. And the moon came in, and oftentimes the sun and the moon, so sun was on his Saturn and moon was on his moon, they come in and they trigger stuff. And if stuff is already hanging out there, and this is a little astrology lesson, if stuff's already hanging out there, like Saturn is slower, it's going to be opposite his Uranus for a bit. Jupiter and Venus, well, Jupiter had been there for a little while, and Venus came in and helped trigger the whole thing. But you would think with Jupiter and Venus on your south node, you would not necessarily get smacked upside the head, surprised by someone leaving your company, someone that you valued leaving your company and being taken by a former employee, which is, essentially treason in those worlds, right? So it's all about letting go. And Saturn, needled Uranus and said, it's time to let go. We get into these nice grooves, even with our employees and stuff and in our work. And I'm laying this out for you because it's important to recognize that when something is triggered, and a lot of things are going on in your chart, it doesn't necessarily mean bad stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean good stuff. It's day-to-day stuff. But four things were going on for him, and that is an event. That is totally an event. So you can think of one aspect like, ooh, Jupiter and Venus are on my sun. Okay, that's nice. But there's got to be other stuff going on in order to really get an event happening. And you may get a transit like that's powerful, Jupiter and Venus, and you don't understand why nothing good is happening, but maybe the other planets just aren't really talking to your chart in a significant way, and this just makes you feel really good or helps you take a risk or something like that. So it also, we want to look at the fact that 4 things were going on for him. Inevitably, something was going to happen. And so his wife also had the Jupiter Venus lining up in her chart too, but not as significantly. The aspects all weren't significant. She's a Libra. She has a bunch of stuff in Libra. But the Jupiter Venus came in and squared all her planets in Libra, which are in the 7th house. So she felt it, but she told me she was relieved. She was like, nah, I'm done. That's it. She lets go easier than he does. And she said he really has a harder time letting go. But he has, so probably expectations of people and loyalty and stuff. And then he had some other issues with another employee on Thursday. And so it's been a real dynamic week for him. And I think that it's a lesson in not getting attached. Well, when do we get attached? When do we not get attached? We get attached to so many things in our lives, and we have to be okay when it's time to let go of them. And I think it's good. Jupiter and Venus are really ultimately good things. And what this is telling me, and I said to her today, is that this is just bringing something really, open and new for him. So they hired new people already because they knew people that were good. So they're already bringing in the new. So this is new, fresh energy. And I like to see that Jupiter and Venus are new, fresh energy. And so this is something important to look at in your own chart. Wherever this had landed, is there new fresh energy coming in? Is there a new dynamic coming in? And that new dynamic should benefit you in a great way. So in the meantime, we saw a crab in the river by us today. Never a crab in the river, okay? This is a river. It just runs through the town here, and it's really very interesting that how did the crab get there? It wasn't a little. It was a big red crab. It was big, and their son saw it, and I was like, okay, what's the feng shui meaning? I said to her, what's the feng shui meaning? Your son is seeing a crab in the river. What's the feng shui of the crab? And it talks about really how we are protected against backstabbing. I said, well, there you go. And we were stunned that this came up. And that the backstabbing part, which they definitely felt backstabbed. But this is saying, I said, Jupiter and Venus are in the sign of the crab. This is a really good example of you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. So even if you had to let go, you're going to be fine. Let go and trust. Not always easy to trust. Not always easy to trust. We want to control. We want to predict the outcome. We can't do that. We have to step into the unknown sometimes. And if any time is good to step into the unknown, it's when Jupiter and Venus are conjunct, so that we know that ultimately, there's going to be something good that comes out of all of it in the end. So Venus is a busy girl this week. She's a busy girl because now she's in Leo. And she's going to be flirty, but she's talking to all the outer planets. So this is important to pay attention to. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, Venus is going to be engaged with the outer planets. So Monday, tomorrow, the 15th of June, she makes a sextile, a smooth flowing aspect to Uranus and Gemini from Leo, where she is. And it's going to be at 6:53 p.m. Eastern Time. So that means she's going to be genuinely flirtatious. And it's easy to slip into chattiness and wittiness and intelligence and connecting with someone through her wit and her wisdom. So that's something very charming on a certain level. Venus and Leo can definitely be flirty and glamorous. So when she's got a little sparkle of the Gemini Uranus energy, she's going to be sharp with the jokes, with the comments, with making little remarks that are witty and funny. So that's a good place for her to be. Then on Tuesday the 16th, she is going to trine Neptune. So she's got Neptune in Aries, Venus and Leo, trine Neptune in Aries, more romantic, more soft, flirty, yes, because there's all this fire going on, but a sultry, a sultry undercurrent of passion and zestiness, that's going to be more the Venus Neptune. It's all smoldering because it's Neptune. Venus and Neptune work well together in a trine, and it's an interesting dynamic again. So Venus is she's wanting a little more passion, but she's going to be coy about it with that Neptune. And then the big reveal happens on Wednesday. And I mentioned this last week on the podcast here. She is going to be with the moon. The moon will have entered Leo by that time. Now, we know that it's going into Cancer tomorrow. It will enter Leo Wednesday morning, the 17th at 8:05 a.m. Eastern Time. Then the moon, since it's in Leo, just like Venus, lunar goddess, is going to follow the steps that Venus has done over these last days. So she's going to sextile Uranus at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then she's going to trine Neptune at 3:09 p.m. And then she's going to conjunct Venus at 4:28 p.m. So moon is really flirty. Moon in Leo, going out there being creative, touching the outer planets, getting flirty. She's doing the same routine Venus just did since Monday. And now she's sort of coming in and putting in her little stamp, her lunar goddess stamp on the same thing Venus just did. Now remember, Venus is not moving super fast. She moves as she moves. And these planets are close together because we're getting closer and closer to that big sextile between all of the outer planets and the trines and the sextiles of the outer planets that we're going to have lining up in July. So because of that, Venus can touch all of them very easily, and then the moon comes in and she touches them all very easily, and then the big kahuna comes on Wednesday. After the moon conjuncts Venus, the moon opposes Pluto a minute later, and Venus opposes Pluto 10 minutes later. So we've got moon conjunct Venus 4:28 p.m. Eastern Time, moon opposite Pluto 4:29 p.m., and then Venus opposite Pluto 10 minutes later at 4:38 p.m. and 9 minutes later, really. And they are all together. Venus and the moon are opposing Pluto. But Venus and Pluto are already getting revved up. Venus and Uranus, Venus and Neptune, she's already getting revved up. And just because she's opposing Pluto and she's past Neptune doesn't mean she's not talking to Neptune anymore. So what about that Venus-Pluto opposition? This only happens once a year unless she's retrograde. But Venus and Pluto opposing each other with the moon joining Venus this is steamy. This is triangle information. This is about if you're in a relationship and there's a triangle brewing, it could be with your dog. It could be, I can't leave the dog alone, honey. That's why I can't come to your house for the weekend. Okay, but I can't bring dogs to your building. Whatever, could be something like that. There's drama involved because Venus is in Leo. The moon is in Leo. Maybe a little bit of relationship drama. There is maybe some secrets going on. There's Neptune, there's Pluto. Maybe there's some secrets. What do you mean you want to see other people? There's that. There's triangulation that way. There's, don't tell so-and-so I told you this, but blah, blah, blah is happening. And so, Venus-Pluto can also be that secretive don't tell someone I told you this. It's a social planet. It doesn't even have to be in your personal, intimate relationships. But Venus-Pluto is that Persephone myth again. And it's the Venus being brought into the underworld and Pluto welcoming her into the underworld, and the two of them in this dance, this passionate dance of mystery, of intrigue, of coyness, of some really deep currents of emotion, and maybe a little power play. And so if you are a Venus-Pluto opposition or a Moon-Pluto opposition, or if you have a Venus-Moon-Pluto situation, as yours truly does, you are going to feel this in some way. It could date back to some childhood thing. If you have this in your chart, it could go right back to a pattern in childhood because this is a recurrence. And if you have this dynamic in your chart, it could be a multitude of things, but you will recognize it by what familiar brand sort of shows up on Wednesday for you and what that could be. Now it could show up Wednesday morning, it could show up on Tuesday. It could really be a dynamic that you are opening your eyes to. And so you want to pay attention to this, especially if you're a Venus-Pluto person. There could be something very simple happening that you wake up and you go, that's it, that's my Venus-Pluto, that's it, I know it. or it could be a real dramatic turn of events, especially since the moon is there triggering things. So this is the big, powerful day of the week. It isn't just Venus Pluto, it's the moon conjoining Venus just before she opposes Pluto. So there's all this Venus energy starting on Monday, and by the time we get to Wednesday, something's happening. So maybe you're dancing around a potential mate and you're interested in them and you're doing a little dance and it all culminates on Wednesday. Maybe you're in a kerfuffle with your life partner. Maybe it's a financial thing. It could be finance. So you want to pay attention to this, especially if you are a Venus Pluto, that's the gecko. And I have to tell you, there have been two geckos running around on the wall here, and I'm like, oh, they're in a Venus-Pluto dance. But you want to pay attention to this. You want to pay attention to what you're feeling earlier in the week about relationships, about finances, about how you are expressing yourself creatively, too, because this could be a really deep creative period as well. So watch this. We've got to watch Venus Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You'll know what it's about by Wednesday, probably, and report back. Report back to the Golden Astrologer podcast. Let me know what happens during Venus Pluto. Did you get a gig somewhere? Are you a musician or a singer or an artist and you got a gallery gig, or you got a big gig that you wanted? Are you an actor and you got a job? Maybe something really exciting like that's going to happen. But there's a lot of creativity in this. With this new moon setting the stage, it could well be, being some interesting creative idea that you come up with, and it takes you to the next level of your art, of your work. It could be a lot of different things. So pay close attention these next days because it's very important. Venus and Pluto oppose every year. She squares him twice a year, and she conjuncts once a year. But the fact that the moon is with her and it's exact at the same time, we're going to feel this. This is going to be something. So I'll be talking about it on Instagram this week, the Golden Astrologer on Instagram. So it's something that you want to really look at, and I expect that there's going to be a story that evolves during this week. Then one of the other big things that's happening is that Chiron is entering Taurus. And I mentioned this briefly last week. It's Friday the 19th. Friday the 19th at 5:20 p.m. Eastern Time, Chiron will enter Taurus. Now, it's going to tiptoe into Taurus. And that means it's going in. It's not going very far. It's going to retrograde in these next months and then leave Taurus on September 18th. Okay? It's leaving to retrograde back into Aries, and it won't come out of Aries till next mid-April, like the 13th of April next year. Okay, so we're getting a blip from this Friday until September 18th. This is the taste of what Chiron in Taurus is about. And so Taurus is ruled by Venus. And so we've been talking a lot about Venus. And so she's making a different kind of appearance in this, in that her sign that she rules, one of her signs she rules, is getting Chiron. Now, this is the first time Chiron will be in Taurus since the 1970s. And this doesn't mean that everybody's going to go broke, because there is always, cycles of everything. And I know my cycles. I've been studying cycles most of my life, especially in astrology. So Chiron entering Taurus could force us to acknowledge, own, and work through any sort of financial wounds we may have. Anything about our traditions. Taurus is a very traditional sign. It is, people who want to do the traditional thing, own a house, have a kid, get married, be, in a very traditional place. And Chiron coming there may bring up some questions for us around those decisions in our life. Did taking the traditional route really help us? Should we have been riskier in our decisions about finances and tradition and stuff? But Chiron going into Taurus is not a reason to freak out and run to the bank and take all your money out. It means that we are going to emotionally, and you know I believe everything's emotional, emotionally confront a lot of the wounds in our skills, abilities, money, finance, anything that we value. So, what do you value? It doesn't have to be a very Taurian thing like owning property. You can value the friends you have in your life. Maybe you've got Taurus in your 11th house, and your friends in your community you value greatly. And so, what do you value in your life? Where is Taurus in your chart? Because Chiron will spend a number of years there. Chiron stays a long time, depending on where it is in the zodiac. Like it flies through Scorpio, the opposite sign. It took a long time in my sign, Aquarius. If you are a Taurus, you are going to start feeling this Chiron energy, and you'll get a taste of it between now and September. And then it goes back and finishes its experience of Aries. And when we talk about Chiron, we talk about where we feel we have been wounded. It is not a planet. It is they call it lots of things. It's an asteroid. It's a planetoid. It's a comet lately. It's a comet. I feel comfortable with it as like a dwarf planet or an asteroid, really, an asteroid. And I feel like it doesn't behave like a planet astrologically. There's not a beginning, middle, and end like Pluto, like Saturn, where there's the transit and it enlightens you and you're better for it in the end. Chiron kind of drags us through the mud quite a bit. And you've heard me before on this podcast, if you've been listening a while, that Chiron can be very complicated. And it's not always the simplest experience, because Chiron is showing us the wound. And sometimes it's a very deep wound that we have to connect with in that area of our chart. And it can be complicated in a very profound way because we're looking for the relief in this. And it's more about confronting what it's showing us. So, you have your Chiron return when you turn 50. So anyone who's born with Chiron in the 70s, in Taurus in the 70s, they're going to be having their Chiron return. Maybe you have Chiron in Taurus and you know exactly where you're wounded around what you value. Maybe the things you value don't value you back. Maybe you don't feel that you have received enough value in those areas of your life. Maybe you don't quite understand why certain values in your life really are things that are hard to let go of. And sometimes when we have to confront Chiron, we have to let go of those things we value, which is, that's complicated, And why do we value them? And what does it do to let go of them? What does it do to us to have to let go let go of the things that we are valuing so greatly in our lives? And sometimes Taurus is so attached. It's so material world. It's so 3D. It's not in outer space like Pisces and Aquarius and stuff. I have Chiron in Pisces. So, it was about healing for me and healer energy and my healing energy and et cetera, et cetera. But when you really have to deal with something where you're very attached, and we get attached, and like we've just been through these years of Uranus and Taurus, and that really just finished in April, and now we're going to get Chiron. So Taurus isn't really getting a break. They're getting a few months break here and there, and then they get Chiron. And that's, again, the area of our lives that probably needs the most shaking up, which is what Uranus did these last 8 years. Uranus shook up the Taurus energy, and that Taurus energy likes the status quo. So Chiron coming there is like, okay, where are you attached and where are you holding on too tight? If Uranus didn't get you out of that, Chiron certainly will make you confront it. And these are things we have to pay attention to. So it's going to be very interesting, very interesting. It doesn't mean we're all going to be poverty stricken. We're not all going to go broke. The stock market is not going to die. It's just maybe our values, our core values are going to be shifting and changing, and we are going to heal things that we didn't expect we wanted to or needed to heal. There's always healing going on. There's always some healing going on, something somewhere. And we lick our wounds where Chiron is. Chiron represents where it's difficult to heal something, where it's complicated, where it almost feels just insurmountable. How do I heal this? And that's something that's profoundly, complicated in the sense that we want to heal things badly where Chiron lands. But sometimes we just can't get our mind around it. We can't get our head around it. And it's so much of a puzzle to really how do I heal this for once and for all? And it's just layers and layers of wounding that we go back and look at. So that's Chiron in Taurus. Where do you have Taurus in your astrological chart? Where did you just get Uranus for the last 7 years? Chiron is coming next. So I think this is fascinating, and it's going to be a fascinating journey. I think we're going to already start learning things in these next months as Chiron moves in these early places in Taurus. Now, remember, Pluto is in the early stages of Aquarius, and that means once Chiron steps into Taurus, Chiron is going to be really in this dynamic with Pluto for a little while. That's a square. So they're not going to smoothly, easily flow together. This is one of those things where Chiron is going to give us a little bit of an unraveling due to Pluto. So Chiron and Pluto are going to be in this dynamic together, and we've got to look at that as well. So Chiron won't get very far. It's not going to really get past 0 this summer, wherever you are. Maybe it's winter, maybe you're in Australia, but these months ahead, Chiron won't get past 0. And so it's kind of a wide square to Pluto, but it's there, and we're going to start to understand it. So welcome Chiron into Taurus, and let's see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. And then the sun enters Cancer next Sunday, a week from today. That's Father's Day in many places in the world, and it is 4:24 a.m. The sun will enter Cancer, and that is the solstice in the northern hemisphere. It's summer. In the southern hemisphere, like I just mentioned, it will be winter. And so this is going to now end Gemini season, and Gemini season will come to a close, and we go into Cancer season. And Cancer is a cardinal sign, and you know what that means. Within a few days, that sun will make a relationship to Neptune, a challenge to Neptune. And that's going to happen the week after. So we've got some time before that happens. But remember that Gemini season is almost finished, which I cannot believe. And we are moving into the cardinal axis again with the sun entering Cancer. Now remember that Saturn and Neptune entered the cardinal sign of Aries, and they were at that cardinal axis back in February. And so this might be a little trigger of those remembrances. Okay. So let's just keep an eye on that sun going into Cancer. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in having a session with me and learning about where all this stuff is happening for you, Venus, Pluto, Chiron in Taurus, then just click book now on my Instagram profile where it's The Golden Astrologer, or click book online on my website, thegoldenastrologer.com, and you can set up a session with me for astrology. If you are looking forward to having a Reiki session with me, that could be very soothing. It can be clearing. It can be supportive. So I highly recommend this lovely Lemurian 5D Reiki, Rainbow Crystal Reiki, and you can book that on my website as well. You can have some 3-month work with me in the expansion mentoring program I have, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and I would love you to join me there, and we can go deeper into your life and make some really profound changes for you, as I have with my mentoring clients over the years. Thank you so much again. Much gratitude to everyone. Watch that Venus Pluto. Watch that flirty Venus this week, and let's see what happens on the other side of this. Thank you for listening. Gratitude to each and every one of you. Many blessings. Have a beautiful week.